All right. So yeah, hello.
Hi.
For anyone that ends up watching this, this is Lizzie, and she is going to talk to us a little bit today about psychology research. So Lizzie, could you maybe just give a description of what your role is now and how you sort of got there, what your journey was to get there?
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently a postdoc at the Monash Alfred Psychiatry Research Centre, or MAPRC. So we're based near the Alfred and sort of part of the Alfred. And the team I'm in is women's mental health research, so focusing a lot on women in particular and their journey. So we look at a lot of different psychiatric conditions, so things like borderline personality disorder, or we call complex trauma disorder, schizophrenia, depression, a huge range. And so I finished my PhD last year, so fairly new to the postdoc world, and the journey getting there was interesting and probably can't be summed up in a couple of sentences, so maybe we can delve into it a bit further.
Oh, yeah.
So that's sort of a little bit about me. So my PhD was not in the team that I'm in now. So my PhD was looking at the theory of schizotypy, or the theory that sort of schizophrenia symptoms can be seen across a continuum in the general population. So it was a women's mental health focus, but it was still, looking at schizophrenia and in psychiatry.
Okay, so have you sort of always been interested in psychology? Did you study psychology in your undergrad, and that sort of led you to this path?
No, so I guess that's why I sort of said it's an interesting journey. So I did biomed and science honors and science double degree, and then at the end of that, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but honors was sort of the next logical step. And then one of my majors was genetics, and I knew I really wanted to focus on genetics. And so looking through all the honors projects, there were a lot of animal studies in there that I felt wasn't really for me. And I wanted something a bit more clinical and, engaging with people. And the study that I ended up doing was the only one available. And that's sort of how I fell into it. And it was, like I said, looking at schizophrenia across the continuum and looking at cognition and genetics. And then that's how I came into this now.
Interesting. Okay, so that's really interesting for me because, I've already emailed you a little bit of background about me, but for anyone that ends up watching, I also sort of went from a biomedical background. So I've done a lot of molecular biology and biochemistry, and I'm now in a PhD that involves a lot of cell culture work, though now that I'm part-time, it's more animal work. And I really like the animal work, but I guess with COVID now, I'm sort of reevaluating. It's a bit risky for me to breed at the moment, so a lot of my projects are being delayed. And I'm just a little bit unsure because of the interest that I've developed in psychology. I'm a little bit unsure whether it's in my best interest to continue with my current project, or whether I should master out and go into something that's a little bit more aligned with my values now and my interests and my skills. So part of why I wanted to talk to you was because I want to sort of investigate some of the pathways to getting to somewhere that's a little bit more in line with I think what I want. And I understand that, I could potentially go into neuroscience research because that would have the molecular biology, components that are a little bit more in line with my training. But at the same time, I'm a little bit unsure about staying in the lab as such a heavy component. At the moment, I've switched to a part-time PhD, so I'm 2 days a week, and that's been the case since February of last year, so February 2019. And that seems to be the best option for me. I'm unsure if that's because of some personal things in my life that I need part-time, or if it's also partly to do with, the type of work that I'm doing in my project. If it maybe doesn't give me enough energy, if it maybe drains me more to be in a lab, be away from people. So I think my ideal role really would be human focused. So if I could potentially learn some skills in interviewing participants, having discussions with people that are directly impacted by different conditions, surveys. So I guess delving a little bit more into more frontline kind of research, I guess, rather than tucked away in the lab in a very specific cellular context that can often be quite far removed from the end result. So yeah, I would be interested to know how, as I mentioned in the email, how people in your field kind of view someone with my skills, because I can understand that if I completed my PhD, which is in type 2 diabetes and skeletal muscle and mitochondria, that might not look so great on an application for a psychology role. I have so many questions, but I will actually be speaking with one of your colleagues. So I'm going to speak with Caroline about the option of potentially adding in a psychology component to my current project. My supervisors are kind of flexible and open to some different options. And maybe that would give me the possibility of continuing research if I'm able to do things, over Zoom with participants or, whatever. Just going to sort of explore some options. But yeah, from your sort of experience of like shifting from biomed, still I guess in biomed, but sort of towards more psychological research, do you have any sort of recommendations on a pathway?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I think it's great that you're going to be talking to Caroline. So she was my PhD supervisor, and she's really great. But yeah, like, me and her and Nat as well, which I think you'll be speaking to, we've been talking about ideas and collaborations with people who are doing animal studies, in schizophrenia or other things. So there's definitely, even for us on this side of it, we definitely want to look at, what's happening in the animal models as well. So I think having those skills is still really useful. In terms of how I transitioned, like I obviously transitioned quite early because I did my honours in the area that I'm sort of in now, in psychiatry. So I think it's a bit hard for me to comment on that. And I think Nat, who you're going to talk to, would be the best person to talk to about that, because she was very sort of molecular and then did her PhD in molecular and then transitioned into the team post PhD. Okay. So I think I'll leave her to answer sort of that area of it.
Yeah, no, thank you.
That would be the best answer coming from her and how she went about doing that. But that being said, I think, with the skills, obviously you learn skills in a lab that are transferable. Not everything is just, okay, I can do only these specific methodologies and that's all I learn. You learn a lot of different things as well, which I think can transfer across different areas. So even though you're not necessarily doing that area, and then I guess, like you said, if you add on a psychology component, which would definitely, I think, be doable, then I think then that'd be actually really great, because then you're sort of doing research across different disciplines. Like with my PhD and with my honours as well, I had, sort of different supervisors in different areas. So like I said, I still kept my genetics component, and I had a supervisor that helped me with my genetics component, and then I had supervisors that helped me more with the cognitive neuroscience aspects of it. And so I tried to hold on to both. As I've come through now, my genetics is slowly, I try to get back into it somehow, but I did try to hold on to both during my PhD so that I could have even broader experience in case I wanted to go in one direction or the other. So I think you can have that biomedical side, but also the psychiatry side of it. So it's about I guess thinking. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you go.
No, finish up.
So I think it's just about thinking about, I guess, where you are now with your project, like you said, whether it's something you could incorporate in or whether you just finish it off, have those skills, and then, try and pick up what Nat did. I'm sure she'll tell you more about it, is, she did RA work first, and then, that was her transition as well into a different area. So, considering you're sort of in the middle of your PhD, that might be the best option.
Okay, so it's interesting that you talk about having sort of supervisors from different areas, because that is something that I considered adding on when I came back from intermission at the start of last year, but it was a bit too much of a hurdle at the time. So it is something that I could consider now. I guess one of the questions that sort of came up from that was like, what do you think are some of the key skills that you use in your role now? Because as you mentioned, you know, a PhD is, it's very multifaceted. Even doing molecular research and animal work, we still have to do all the literature research. So we have to learn how to consolidate knowledge and produce reports and project manage and a lot of other things that are kind of core research skills that can be translated no matter what area you're in. So, you know, I know this is kind of a difficult question, but yeah, do you reckon you'd be able to sort of summarize some of the key skills that you use in your role at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in addition to, I guess, the very standard sort of, you know, clinical assessment and cognitive assessment that we do, I think a lot of it is really, like you said, you know, even literature searching, you know, you're going to shift, you know, even if you finish your PhD in whatever area, you know, you're very likely to shift topics and research ideas over time anyway. So I think it's about, you know, knowing how to look at the literature, you know, keeping up to date with literature of whatever you're interested in, and then, you know, being organized and, you know, trying to balance everything and managing everything. And I think those sort of skills are more important than the, you know, learning how to do clinical assessment, because I think anyone can sort of pick that up if you have a really good foundation of being able to learn. I think that's just a big skill. And then, yeah, like I said, being able to juggle your time, I find is very difficult. But, you know, if you're having lots of things and, you know, yeah, having to learn a new research area. And we've been talking about this as well in our team, you know, with COVID obviously happening this year, a lot of people had to sort of suddenly not change, but have research ideas in that area as well. And we had a survey we put out for COVID-19 and mental health, but no one had any knowledge necessarily about mental health during pandemics or anything like that. So it was about reading literature again and, you know, formulating ideas based on that. And then I think at the start of the year, you know, we had bushfires and we talked about bushfires and mental health. And again, you know, no one had experience in that necessarily, but then, you know, when writing up grants or whatever, then you go back and read and you learn about it, and then you know, put forward ideas. So it's also, I guess, that critical thinking, you know, and the ability to formulate ideas based on what you've read. And I think those sort of things is what's going to get you further along than, oh, you know, I can do cognitive assessment or whatever it might be, or I can work really well with mouse models. I think those sort of skills, yeah, if you're a PhD student, you should be able to pick up, you know, those things eventually. It might take you a bit longer if you're used to animals and then you're going to humans, but I think if you have a good foundation, you should be able to pick that up.
So that's really, I think actually really helpful for me and a lot of people, because one of the things that I worried about when I was kind of deciding on my honours project, and then even I took some time out of academia and then came back as a research assistant, and I moved into cardiovascular research and then was choosing my PhD topic. And I was quite concerned about my choice. Because I kind of felt like, okay, this is such a huge decision. What I decide to focus on is going to predetermine the rest of my academic career. And I just felt so much pressure around that. And it's been really interesting speaking with different people and sort of learning that that's not necessarily the case. And so I've sort of formulated the opinion that, yeah, I think the technical skills are probably more important. So whether that's kind of the core research skills I had also previously sort of lumped, molecular lab skills and animal skills sort of into that technical skills category. And I felt like those are kind of the more important things in terms of your capability of moving forward, whereas the theoretical knowledge seems to be easier to pick up. And obviously, the theory behind different topics is so complex. I don't want to trivialize that at all, but I guess because of the core research skills that we develop, during honours, during a PhD and further on, it means that you are better able to kind of decipher those complex theories, whereas the technical skills, I think, require more practice because they're different from what you've done before. So I think that's a really important point, and it's kind of nice to hear it be confirmed again by another person.
Yeah. And I guess, even, when people hire RAs, they're not necessarily looking for, have they done, in our field, have they done this particular clinical assessment? We're looking at whether they'll be able to do it. So a lot of our RAs, when they started, they haven't seen these scales that we're using or necessarily dealt with, certain populations that we're looking at. But it's about, their experience, with research in general, and then, they sort of learn those things when they're, when they start, when they join the team. So, I think it, like I said, those things you can learn. And I think you shouldn't be put off by it, or put off by certain areas just because, I don't know anything about this area, or I haven't had my PhD in this area, so I can't go that way. And also, if you speak to Kara and Nat later on as well, you'll see that their research areas are not where their PhD was in. And I'm actually transitioning away from where my PhD was as well. So I don't think any of us, I think Kara's sort of in the ballpark. But, we retain sections or things that we've learned from our PhD, but the actual overall research ideas and topics have changed.
Okay.
And I think that's quite common.
Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting because you don't necessarily hear about that side of things as much. So I guess, I'm coming up with questions as we go, but so I would be interested to know, so this might become a little bit more personal and a little bit more around sort of your opinions of academia as well, because I think it's pretty much everyone I've ever spoken to within academia questions the industry and can see that there's a lot of room for improvement. And a lot of people have backup plans because, it's a very kind of unstable, insecure industry. So I would be interested to know, because I've only had experience really, my honours lab was at Sydney University. So I've had experience in that lab, then another lab at the Heart Research Institute, and then a different lab for my PhD. But they've all been, molecular biology based. So from the outside, when I've seen public health PhD students, it appears that there's a little bit more of and this is a massive generalization, but that there might be more of a supportive environment. So I'd be, so I mean, it's really hard to, I don't want to say that sort of molecular research and lab-based research isn't supportive, because I have really supportive supervisors and I have a great lab, and I've met some really great students as well. There are definitely individuals that have made the experience easier, but whether it's my perspective or not, I find it very, very competitive. And people kind of, you compare yourself to others, but also you can feel cut down by others, and you can feel like, everyone's working so hard and everyone has so many time demands that when you express that to people, they're not often empathetic. They kind of flip back and describe their own struggles, kind of, which in a way can diminish yours and make you feel like, you know, it's just expected to overwork yourself and for that not to be valued. And this is why, you know, like I said, it gets a little bit more personal. So please tell me if you don't feel comfortable with this part being recorded. But do you have sort of any insight on that from your experience and from sort of where you find yourself now?
100%. And it's fine for it to be recorded. So yes, it's very competitive, and me just finishing PhD, I find it even more so. I think the system, and I've spoken to people in my team, the system is very much built, you know, right now to help the later ECRs. And even then it's a bit of a struggle with that as well. But in terms of true ECRs, it is very, very difficult, you know, because with people going up for grants that really fall into that 1-2 year post PhD range, then those people generally have done research before starting their PhD, and they still have heaps of papers, you know, and you look at these grants, it's like, oh yeah, they're only 1 or 2 years out of their PhD, but they have 40, 50 papers. And, you know, for someone that's a true ECR, not true ECR, I guess, but, you know, for someone who honestly just went from like undergrad to honors to PhD, that's not feasible. That's not possible unless we, you know, wrote like 10, 15 papers a year. And even, you know, seniors don't necessarily do that. So I find that, it's very difficult. And I think maybe you're sort of around the same time as me, sort of missed out because the investigator grant changed sort of midway through the PhD. So I, you know, was very clear, and I'd spoken to my supervisors. I knew my goals at the start of PhD and worked towards them, and worked towards how can I improve my my CV for the investigator grant. And the way that it was structured changed halfway through, and it just didn't quite work the way that it would, like I thought it would. And so I haven't actually applied. And, you know, I would have probably applied a couple of times. I've had the opportunity, but I just haven't because I'm just not competitive. But whereas I felt before with the old system, you know, that's what I was working towards. So I probably would have been a bit more competitive. And that's just bad timing, honestly, and bad luck. So, so that's sort of my experience with it. And, you know, even like things with grants and all of that, you're competing with people, you know, such high standard, high level. And like you said, everyone's overworking, everyone's pushing themselves to, you know, write these papers. And it's very difficult to compete with that at the level, you know, of a PhD, you know, / ECR. So it's tough. And I don't know if you know, but so I work part-time at the moment. So I have a daughter, so she's 2.5. So I had her during my PhD. So that she was planned, but obviously that added a whole lot of different things as well. That made it, you know, more difficult as well. And, you know, and now finding time, I'm happy to work part-time, but then it's, like you said, making sure that I'm not overworking. You know, full-time people overwork, but part-time I find particularly hard, especially during COVID, to really restrain myself that I'm not working over the hours that really I'm employed for, which is part-time hours. And so that's also interesting balance there. But I guess, going back to sort of CV, you know, you try and build it really early on. And like I said, if you just go straight out of like undergrad, like I feel like a decent CV, and it will still take me, I think, a couple of years to really be on par with people that obviously were able to do some research or write some papers before that point. So it's interesting. And then like with Caro, you know, she has kids as well. So in terms of how long she's been doing research compared to, you know, the grant she's able to apply for, you know, we end up being in a very similar bracket. I think the last round, if we had both applied, we would have sort of been in that early bracket because she's had kids, but she's been in the game for a long time. And that's not to say she shouldn't apply, but then it makes it very difficult for people who literally just finished, when you're sort of, I mean, she was sort of in the EL2, oh no, sorry, the early research, the second one, and I was in the first level, but still we're sort of in the same bracket. So
yeah,
it's interesting. And like you said, I think there's a lot of room for improvement.
So yeah, I mean, I did have a quick look on your Twitter profile when you mentioned that you had Twitter. So I saw that you had a daughter, and I can't imagine the challenges of having a child on top of, trying to finish up your PhD. So, I've only met you today, but congratulations. Like that's amazing. Yeah, I don't want to go too much down the gender equity, because I it's a topic that gets talked about a lot, and I think as women we are very conscious of how the system needs to change to kind of improve that, and I guess there are some initiatives that have started to be put in place to try to address that, but I think that will take time. But definitely from the side of trying to maintain part-time hours, when you have a child, one of my supervisors, so my main supervisor and one of my others are a husband-wife team, and they have two kids.
Oh, cool.
They're 5 and 8, and Anna works part-time.
Yeah.
And I've had conversations with her before about what that's like, and yeah, it sounds really, really tricky, because obviously she cares about her career and she really cares about her research, but she wants to prioritize her children, and trying to fit those two things together, she ends up definitely working more than what she's paid for, and struggling really hard to focus on her children when she's with them. So trying to find those boundaries, and I can't imagine what it's like during COVID now. That's just like complicated things and blurred the boundaries so much more. So yeah, that's, that is something that I guess has been on my mind as well, in terms of moving forward, and what I would like my life to look like, and whether academia sort of fits that or not. I've been with my partner for almost 3 years now. We've just moved in together in November.
Nice.
But no, I haven't had children or anything like that. So yeah, I think it's important to sort of think ahead a little bit, about what you'd like your income to be, and what you'd like your life to look like, whether you want to be able to work from home a little bit, whether you want to try and work part-time, if that's feasible, all that kind of stuff. I think for anyone that ends up watching this is really important to think about, because you might absolutely love research and you might love your job, but it might not be the right industry to allow you to live the life that you really want. So I think
I think it's really interesting you say that. I have this discussion with my husband a lot, and he's very supportive, but it's always a discussion about, yes, you can keep trying for grants, you can keep trying to get, different things in a more stable job. But, at what point do you sort of say, okay, this has sort of gone long enough. Do I need to reconsider and sort of, think about, while this is my passion, can we live like this, moving forward, where you don't have a stable job, or you're sort of dependent on grants. And so, obviously I'm not at that stage yet. I'm still very early. So still going to try. And like I said, he's very supportive of that. But, for some people you can try and it might never come. And then you sort of have to, think about what you, like you said, what you want in your life compared to, I guess, what you want in your career. And it's a very difficult thing, a very difficult decision to make, I think. That being said, I think there's also people who are very successful in it. So I had 3 supervisors, and all of them are mothers. And so I think that was really great to see how they did it, and all their kids were sort of different ages, and one of my supervisors had twins. So it's good to have, surround yourself with people like that as well, to see, okay, it can be done. But then, like you said, you sort of see, okay, it can be done, but they still work a lot of hours. So it's this difficult, I think, balancing act. And you need to decide, I guess, if it's right for you and what you're sort of willing to give up, which sounds sad, and obviously as well, I think in this day and age is very different. Women work, whereas back in the day, they were the stay-at-home mums, and they were able to devote that time and energy, and like you said, that's sort of disappearing. And I think, my daughter, I put her into childcare quite early. She went into childcare when she was about 6-7 months old. And that was a decision we made so that I could, still continue doing my PhD and all of that. And obviously, my parents and my in-laws were not entirely happy with that, because in their minds, you should be at home with them for the full, at least for the year and even further than that, and spend all that quality time. And so it was hard. She didn't, she was only going in 1 or 2 days a week, but, to make that decision of, trying to balance family life and PhD or research life, it's difficult. But then that being said as well, I'll just segue into this bit, but I did get a grant in 2018 to collaborate in Germany, and I went for a month. And my daughter was about 6-7 months at the time. And so again, I think it's important to have a supportive partner. So my husband was great, and he actually took annual leave and came with us, and so he became full-time carer in Germany, and I did my collaboration and my research for that month, and she came with us. And so it was very difficult to manage, but I think it's also important to realize, and obviously it doesn't work for everybody, but I think it's important to realize that things can be done. You don't just give up on grants and opportunities because you have kids. But like I said, not everyone can do that, and we were very fortunate that the circumstances all sort of came together and worked for us in that way, that he was able to take leave and he was happy to look after her, and I could just go over there for that month and do some research and take hold of that opportunity. So that was nice.
I'm trying to remember everything that I want to say, because so much came up for me as you were just talking.
Sorry.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you, because it was all really valuable stuff. So I mean, congratulations on the grant, and that's really fantastic that you have a supportive partner and you were able to make that work. I've had discussions with my partner. We're not at that stage yet, but if we decided to have children, he's actually said he would be willing to be a stay-at-home dad. And that actually, as a woman, that makes me feel a lot less hesitant about making that big life decision, because one of the things that worries me is that, we've come from societal tradition where women didn't work, and now we are working, and it kind of seems like now we've just got so much more of everything to do, and society kind of hasn't caught up to that yet, in a way. I think the point about having a really supportive partner, I mean, for anyone, that's important, but even thinking ahead about that, if that's something that you want to do, to have those discussions early and see if there's going to be a way that you'll be able to try to manage your career and children, because that is really difficult.
I'll just say, just really quickly, I think it doesn't even have to be a partner, supportive family members in general, that could look after. And all of our parents have definitely been very helpful in looking after our daughter as well. So I think, whoever you can get, whether it's partner or family member or friends, some, people that can help and care for kids at the same time. It's very, very good.
That is a good point. If I didn't decide to have children, I've got a lot of friends that have had kids, and I would love to be Auntie M. And provide that for them. So what else came up for me in that? Yeah, so the other important point, you obviously that was difficult to go to Germany with a child that was sort of 6 months old and your partner taking annual leave. But I think this is a really important point as well that I wish someone had told me when I was younger, that no matter what sort of career role you go into, there are always going to be challenges. And it's not about shying away from that. I think it's and trying to find something where there aren't challenges, or there are less challenges, but kind of what I've decided is that it would be more important to pay attention to what you're really drawn to and what you're really passionate about and what sort of internally drives you, what excites you, because when you have that in your career role, it makes some of those big decisions less about sacrifice, and more about, I guess, compromise, and it feels worth it for you because it just feels so important. And that's definitely something that I've kind of found through my PhD. I now that my research interests have shifted more towards psychology, and that is because of a personal experience and something really difficult that I went through. But now that thing drives me so much harder than my current project does. And I think that's quite common. I see people that are in cancer research because they lost a family member to cancer. A colleague of mine is in Alzheimer's research because her grandma experienced that, and she could see the impact that had on people. So I think that's a really sort of important thing to think about. You might be good at a certain type of research, but that may not be enough, considering the challenges that we face in academia to push you forward. The other thing that came up was, I've sort of become aware, as I mentioned before, a lot of academics have sort of backup plans in case, for whatever reason, they're unsuccessful in moving up the ladder. And that can just sometimes be pure, it's just unlucky sometimes. And out of your control. But the suggestion of sort of continuing on that path while it makes you happy and while it feels sustainable and while you still feel like it's within your power, but I guess noticing that you can, I think I've seen the metaphor of a highway, noticing that you can take the highway exit at sort of any point. And so I think people in academia take that at different points. Some might do that straight after a science degree or after honours, or I actually did it after honours and then I came back. After some work experience in the industry, after a PhD, after a postdoc, whatever. And so, yeah, it is an important point. I might be considering exiting right now because that might be right for me, but for you that's not right yet. It sort of feels right for you at this stage. There was something else that came up that I can't remember what it was. I guess there was sort of another question related to that. So do you know and do you feel comfortable sharing what kind of drives you in your research? Are you like me? Are you more of sort of a people person, or are you in love with the design process, or in love with the execution of the experiments, or what is it for you, do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, when I knew I want to do genetics and more, with people, I'd done a bit of lab work and I thought, if I go that way, then that's fine. But, I'd rather not. And then as I started doing this clinical stuff and, talking to different people, and obviously I did my research in schizophrenia. So, talking with patients as well. And I was like, no, I definitely, the lab is just definitely not for me, not as a full-time thing. If I ever did a genetics component, then it would be a section. And I did do little bits and pieces during my PhD. But yeah, it was always going to be after that. I just don't think I could sit in the lab and not converse you know, people like patients, like, you know, on a regular basis. And that's just very me, you know, whereas some people would love to just sit by themselves and and do their own experiments, and that's completely fine. But I think I figured that out quite early, that that's what I was gonna do. And then, like I said, you know, my shift into women's mental health came, yeah, I guess sort of towards the end of my PhD, really. So Caroline, who you'll talk to, she moved back, I guess, into women's mental health, the women's mental health team, and became deputy director. And she was my main supervisor. So I sort of followed her into that. And then my other team, we were based in the same building, but my other supervisor and her team moved back to Swinburne, and I remained where I am now at MapRC. So then after that, when I finished, it was sort of a, where do I go from here? Because my research didn't really fit within women's mental health at all. And then timing wise, they were looking for someone to be acting women's mental health team manager. And they told me, you know, apply for it, and, you know, you're a good fit with the team, you know, the people, and, you know, so I did that. So I ended up doing that for since September last year to April this year as a maternity leave replacement. And that was really great because it just got me to learn about all the different studies that were in the women's mental health team that I sort of had heard about bits and pieces, but wasn't completely involved in because that was not my team. And then developed sort of a better understanding of that. And then, you know, then being hired as a postdoc part-time became the decision of, you know, where's my research heading to now? And, you know, it was sort of like, yeah, my research didn't align with what the goals were of the team. And so it was about thinking about a new research area. And that's sort of what I said before, is that your research area is going to change over time and, you know, changing essentially completely. So now I am moving into PCOS and cognition, so polycystic ovary syndrome, and still keeping like my knowledge of cognition and possibly genetics still, we'll see about that, and looking at it in women with PCOS, and sort of touching with what you said before. The reason I chose that, obviously it's women's health and women's mental health, but I have PCOS. And so that is what sort of led me down that direction. And it was like, okay, I want to look at, yes, their cognition, and I also want to look at their mental health, you know, in terms of infertility and things like that. And so, yeah, so it's sort of interesting that you said that before, because that's, you know, that is actually the route I took, but also sort of being pushed in that direction because, you know, I sort of went where the team was sort of going and having to switch that. So that's sort of what's driven me to where I am right now in terms of my research area. So yeah, it's sort of like I said, it's a long journey. There's a lot of things, and it's very unexpected. You know, and if you told me at the end of my PhD, I probably wouldn't have said this. I was very certain I wanted to stay with my area, and I was going to for a long time. And now it's, you know, sort of switching very early. And then I think also something we talked about, you know, now it's about me learning this whole new topic and this whole new area that I didn't do. And essentially me and Carrie sort of joke a bit about it. That's sort of like doing another PhD thesis. You know, you do research, you have to develop like more studies, and, you know, something that's almost completely new. You know, so that's why I sort of said at the start, you know, the skills that you have, you know, I'm bringing some of those skills, but I'm not bringing all of them with me into this new research area. But it's about, you know, doing the research and then being able to formulate the ideas and try to design some studies, and then, you know, see where that goes in the future. But yeah, you know, it's all sort of new and exciting. And yeah, like you said, you got to find the passion of what's going to drive you, because it's going to be necessary. Research in academia is hard, as we've discussed.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, thanks for sharing. I think that's really important to sort of point out, because we we don't necessarily know, where we're going to end up. And that's definitely something that I've discovered in speaking with people in all different industries, that, you have this interest and you have a degree maybe in something, or maybe not even a degree, life experience, and then you do something else, then you do something else. And all of a sudden, like, some people get to this point where they find an intersection between those different interests and passions, and you can never predict. It just seems like you can never predict that. And actually that reminds me of something that you mentioned before about kind of preparing yourself based on your goal, and trying to do what's necessary to help you get there. So that's an approach that I've taken a lot in academia, but also just with my life. I've always been very ambitious, and I wanted to make sure that I was giving myself the best opportunity to get to where I wanted to go. But I've become aware of the downfall. There can be a downfall in that approach that I've become aware of for myself, in that if you're always so results focused, you can become very, very concerned with the future, which can generate anxiety. But also it took me away from the process of what I was doing, and it took me away from the enjoyment of what I was doing, because I was so future focused. And so I think coming back to focusing on the present, and is what I'm doing right now something that I'm actually drawn to, something that I'm interested in, something that I'm good at, or is it just like a thing that I'm doing to try to get me to somewhere that I think I want to go, but I don't actually know that I want to go there? Because if I'm not focusing on what I enjoy and what I'm good at right now, I'm going to be led into a path that I potentially don't enjoy, and potentially I'm not as good at, or maybe I'm good at it, but maybe don't enjoy it as much. So I think that's sort of a really important point that came out of that discussion as well. So I probably am wary of sort of the need to maybe tie up quite soon. So I guess I think the one, I had a final question and now I've lost it, which is crazy. I think I just wanted to say, is there, it's such an open-ended question, but is there sort of any advice that you would give to undergrads or honours students or PhD students that are coming through and considering, I guess, their research topic, or considering sort of continuing in academia? Is there any sort of piece of advice that just that kind of comes to mind automatically that you'd want to share? I know there's so much you learn so much through this, so it is a difficult question, and I'm sort of putting you on the spot. So
it is a difficult question, and there's definitely a lot of things, but I think, something we've talked about a lot is passion. And I think that's really, what really drives you and makes it worth it. I think the problem is that if you don't have passion, then, not to say it's not worth it, but I think then the problems with academia and the struggles and getting grants and the instability, for me personally, outweighs that. And then to me, it's not as worth it if you're not passionate about it. Like, if I wasn't passionate about what I was doing, I probably would have, taken that exit, like you said, because I could find a stable job. Obviously I have a family and we have mortgages. We have to think about a lot of things. And so if it was something that I was sort of on the fence about, then it wouldn't be for me. So it's about finding what you're truly passionate in. But then that being said, that can take a while. Like I said, my journey of finding where I am now, it's taken a while. So it's difficult. But I think, think about where, what research you ultimately, I guess, want to end up in, and if it's feasible for you to get there in a certain time frame. And if not, what you're going to do in the meantime. You could do extra work or RA work or things like that, and then decide after that. And RA work is fairly stable. then, or if it's something you definitely think is going to take you a long time to get to and you've got other responsibilities, like we talked about, you have to outweigh it. But at the moment, for me, the passion is enough for me to keep going with this. And then to the point, in the future where it's not anymore, or, where there's just too much responsibilities, that is just, the passion is not enough to, to warrant me pursuing this, then I'll have to think about it. But, fingers crossed, for grants and, and everything, that something happens in the future. So I think, like, ultimately, is really enjoying research. It's quite taxing, whether you're in the lab, such as yourself, or even if you're doing what I'm doing, seeing participants that have a lot of different psychiatric conditions, that can still be taxing, and doing cognitive assessments is quite tiring. So, you definitely need to find that motivation to drive you, whether it's in research or maybe, it might be some other part of your life that's sort of driving that. But I think you need to find that if you're going to be successful as an academic. But then that being said, that might not be your goal necessarily. I think in the future my goal is sort of to be researcher and lecturer, so sort of split that. So I do want to do really well in research. I also am trying to sort of pave that way into the lecturing side of it as well. So
that could be a whole nother chat for us. We have some similar interests. So yeah, I mean, thank you for that, and I think that's really valuable. And I agree. People talk about passion a lot, but it's not so simple to nail down. And as much as and my supervisors are aware of this, so it's fine for me to say to the webs that I'm not super passionate about my project, my PhD project anymore. And I was definitely interested in it when I started, but that was quite a few years ago, and I've been through a huge amount of personal change, and have had some experiences that have changed my interests. So if I hadn't, moved interstate and started this PhD and had some personal things in my life, I wouldn't be where I am. And I know that's, a bit cliche, that people are always like, I am who I am because of my experiences, but it's, it's true. And I don't, as much as it's been a very, very difficult journey, I don't regret the decisions that I made. I really don't. But yeah, there's no way that I could have. Sometimes I wonder, how did I not know at like 18 that I should have gone into probably marine science or something? I'm from Byron. I'm a beach baby, always have been. The ocean is my happy place. Like, how did I not put those two things together? I don't know. I don't know what I was doing. But, I've been on this meandering pathway like a lot of other people, that has led me to have some experiences that are both good and bad. And I guess now I'm at the point where I'm starting to try to bring it all together and build a life that's really for me and not based so much on expectation or perceived expectation, not based on society. And like, it's something that I could have only come to in the way that I came to it. So I guess from that, really the thing to say is like, just give things a go. If you don't know what you want, try something. If you don't like it, change, and you'll end up eventually, hopefully, somewhere that works for you.
One thing I'll say, sorry, quickly, on what you said, is that this is something I tell sort of students, and when I give like careers talks at schools and stuff, is that, I think a lot of people feel like when they choose a degree, they're sort of stuck, and, they choose that line of career, they're sort of stuck there. And sort of, what you said, how did you not know at that age, like that was what you should have got into? It's like, I always find it so interesting that, we make that career choice when, we're 16, pretty much, when you have to choose your BCE subjects. and then expected to know and be so sure that that's what we're going into. And people are just so scared after that to then change into something different. And I always use the example of my husband, and he's fine with it. But he, did his degree in marketing and finished it, and just went, like, he just couldn't really find a marketing job, and it was sort of second guessing what it was, and then ended up working. Now he's in finance and really loves it, and sort of built his passion just because he applied, and working through that has developed his sort of passion for it. But it's not related at all to what he did in undergrad, and he'll probably never use that marketing degree. But I think people are so scared to just leave what they've spent years studying. And same, I guess, with the PhD. They do the PhD, they just are scared to sort of branch away from that particular area. I think, that's sort of another, I guess, piece of advice, is that we're still so early in our lives and in our career. Even, people change their careers when they're 50, so it can always change. So I think we should never feel like stuck in, what we're doing just because I spent, 5 years doing this means I have to stick with it forever. So I think people, need to be careful of that.
Yeah, and my partner has a similar story. So he was a machinery operator for 7 years and hated it, but it was good money and it helped him to buy a house. And then he felt like he was stuck there because he had a mortgage, and he kept being told by people, you'll never be on this kind of money, like you'll never be able to hold on to your investment property if you leave. And he has recently shifted to become a mental health peer practitioner. So he did a certificate 4 and then shifted into that area about a year ago, and he loves it. And he's actually now on more money than he was before. So it was fear that was holding him back, and discomfort. And I'm totally familiar with that feeling, and I've seen it in so many people. And in fact, I've actually been told by people when I took intermission, don't quit, like, you'll regret it if you quit. And how would you feel if you let go of something that you've worked so hard for? And luckily I had enough awareness from the therapy that I've been through to sort of see that for what it was, that it was a projection of their own experiences, and that they'd put so much into building their career that they didn't feel like they could leave. But it is a choice. And I think, I agree, it's something that's really important to make people aware of. It's scary, like it's a scary choice, and it's uncomfortable and it's uncertain. But so is staying in something that in 5 or 10 years time is going to lead to you being completely miserable and resentful and living a life that you don't want. So I think that's possibly a really good point to end on. So I just want to thank you so much for a really great discussion. I love hearing people's stories, and I actually really love these long form kind of discussions because they kind of lead down pathways that you don't expect them to. And, we have similar, I guess, outlooks on the industry and what it's like to be a woman in the industry. You've got some extra perspective that you've shared from being a step up as an early career researcher. So I think for people that are considering staying within academia, it's important to have those discussions around the difficulties and what can sort of maybe make that feel like less of a sacrifice, and things to think about when you're choosing, going down that path. And for me personally, I've gotten some really good stuff out of it as well, to know that, I have options, and that, even if I complete this PhD, which is in diabetes research, that I can, potentially shift to something that fits a bit better with me. So it's, it helps with my future anxiety a little bit too, a lot actually, to know that I have options, both within academia from the discussions that I've had with you and will have with some others, and also outside academia, some other discussions that I'm having. So thank you very much.
Very, very welcome. And thanks for reaching out to me. I think it's been, really good discussion. And, honestly, I wish I had known some of these things a lot earlier on. So I think it's really great that you're sharing this for other people to hopefully get some advice and learn some things from, get them thinking.
Definitely. So I'll tag you on Twitter, and yeah, obviously feel free to share with whoever you'd like to, and I'd love to keep in contact. You know, if the restrictions ever lift, we work very close to each other, so we can always catch up for another like coffee or lunch or whatever.
Definitely.
I'd really like that. So good luck with juggling part-time and COVID and a new toddler. I can understand that would be very challenging. So good luck with it, and hopefully I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. And yeah, good luck to you as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.